New report on the origins of COVID. According to two sources with direct knowledge, the Energy Department says it has, quote, low confidence that the virus likely originated from a lab leak in Wuhan, China. However, it believes COVID was not the result of a man-made bioweapon. The Wall Street Journal was the first to report on this classified intelligence report recently given to the White House and key members of Congress yesterday. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was asked about this development.
Did the coronavirus pandemic start in a lab? Is that what you believe now?
Well, Dana, there is a variety of views in the intelligence community. Some elements of the intelligence community have reached conclusions on one side, some on the other. A number of them have said they just don't have enough information to be sure. Here's what I can tell you. President Biden has directed repeatedly every element of our intelligence community to put effort and resources behind getting to the bottom of this question. And one of the things in that Wall Street Journal report, which I can't confirm or deny, but I will say the reference to the Department of Energy, President Biden specifically requested that the national labs, which are part of the Department of Energy, be brought into this assessment because he wants to put every tool at use to be able to figure out what happened here. And if we gain any further insider information, we will share it with Congress and we will share it with the American people. But right now, there is not a definitive answer that has emerged from the intelligence community on this question.
A source tells NBC News the report is, quote, not being viewed as hugely significant among the intelligence community due to interagency disagreements about COVID's origins. In a statement sent to NBC, the Department of Energy says it continues to support the thorough, careful, and objective work of our intelligence professionals in investigating the origins of COVID-19, as the president directed. China has denied that COVID originated from a lab leak and called on all sides to stop politicizing the issue. Meanwhile, House Republicans have kicked off their own investigations into the origins of the pandemic. A spokesperson for the Oversight Committee said the committee is, quote, reviewing the classified information provided.
Well, you know, this has been an ongoing debate for some time. There was the Energy Department saying they have low confidence, but think that it may be a lab leak. And Jen, you've had other intel agencies, this Tommy Vitor, 4 intel agencies think COVID spread naturally. The DOE thinks the lab leak with low confidence. FBI thinks lab leak with moderate confidence. None think it was part of a Chinese bioweapon program. And he's saying, hope the DNI will release what info it can soon. This is something, though, and we've said it here. I remember Tom Cotton got attacked by some newspaper. I forget it. Maybe it was the Times. I forget who it was for talking about the possibility of a lab leak. And we said on the show, we don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. The problem here is the Chinese, and you can talk to Matt Pottinger about this if anybody has any questions. The Chinese haven't been cooperating since December of 2019.
And everything is politics.
So it's really hard to get to the bottom of it.
Right. That's exactly the problem. I mean, there was a report back in 2021, Joe, where the same intelligence agencies had similar conclusions. What is new, as you just noted, is the Department of Energy, because they have the national labs, because President Biden asked them to use all of their resources to look into it, did conclude with low confidence. But the FBI had moderate confidence back in 2021 and still has that today. So not a ton has changed. The reason, as you just alluded to, is because the Chinese are not providing data, and it originated there. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, has asked them to do that. The Biden administration, countless European countries. And until they do that, and I doubt they ever will at this point, it will be very difficult, even for the intelligence agencies in the United States or any other country, to have a real conclusion of what the origin is here. So
Congressmember Goodin's comments questioning my loyalty to the U.S. is absolutely outrageous and disgusting. It's based on false information spread by an extreme right-wing website. But furthermore, it's racist. I very much doubt that he'd be spreading these lies were I not of Chinese-American descent. In my opinion, it's McCarthyism at its worst, and it's downright dangerous. Making ugly And false accusations like this puts a target on my back for something that is not true. And in fact, it just perpetuates the stereotype that Asian Americans are foreigners in their own land, no matter how many generations they've been in this country or are like me and were born and raised in this country. But we have to look at where this is coming from. Congressmember Gooden appears to sympathize with violent insurrectionists and spreads big lies to the American people, having voted not to certify the election of President Biden, and in fact is one of those extreme MAGA Republicans in the House that are focused on baseless conspiracy theories.
Nice try, lady. It's Monday, 27 February, year of our Lord 2023. No, I've been fully sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party, the first civilian in American history to do so. Biden administration didn't lift a finger about that because it happened literally 30 seconds. It was announced by Chinese authorities 30 seconds after Biden took his hand off the Holy Bible on Inauguration Day. No. I am the founder of the new co-founder of the new federal state of China, which is to support the Lao Beijing in their overthrow of the illegitimate Chinese Communist Party. Rogan's book, which is still the definitive book about the Trump administration and Xi, called Chaos Under Heaven, identifies me as the head of what's called the Super Hawks. And he said the Super Hawks is an entirely new concept. And it was what was driving the administration, because you had hardliners, you had realists, you had the accommodationists, you had Kushner and Mnuchin and Cohen, the accommodationists from Wall Street. You had the realists like, Jim Mattis and, McMaster's and it's called the realists. And then you had the hardliners like Pompeo, they're hardliners. And then you had the Super Hawks. The Super Hawks don't buy into the fact that the CCP is a legitimate government of the Chinese Communist Party, of the people of China, the Chinese state or the Chinese people. And who else doesn't think that is Wang Qishan and these guys inside the CCP that are all the time worried about their legitimacy and worried about questions of their legitimacy. Remember, the first thing we did is have people start talking about the CCP and not China and not the Chinese people, lady. Okay, so don't throw up the racism card. No, we took it away from any even discussion of the Chinese people or the Chinese state, and we're focused on the criminal element in Beijing, which is the problem. And that would be the Chinese Communist Party. And to show that we're not even close to being racist, the biggest issue we have to take them down and to free Lao Beijing is the collaborationists they have that are anything but Chinese, but are Americans, American citizens. And we're going to get to the bottom of all that. I got Frank Gaffney is co-host, and we got two of the heaviest hitters from the Committee on the Present Danger. We got Trevor Loudon and Reggie Littlejohn. Frank, first off, I wanted to play the Wuhan lab part this morning because, lo and behold, we haven't talked about Wuhan on the War Room on 23 January 2020 and War Room Pandemic. When we flipped the show from impeachment pandemic, we laid out the case for the bioweapons lab. Wuhan was the center of PLA military. It was the health center for the PLA since 1949 and even before then. The Wuhan is certainly a biolab. Certainly is the reason they wanted to go make it a level 4 lab. And Fauci and these guys were all collaborationists, all working with them, and they're doing gain of function or directed evolution or weaponization, whatever you want to call it. And right there, you see, oh no, they're not working. And by the way, Joe Scarborough, it's a bald-faced lie. Scarborough. The paper was the Washington Post, and quite frankly, Cotton gave a watered-down version of the War Room. That was about 3 or 4 weeks into this. I think it took place in the first couple of weeks of February of 2020. And no, Joe Scarborough, you're a bald-faced liar. The paper was the Washington Post, and you covered every day for what happened in Wuhan. So don't sit there now as all of a sudden the stones are being unturned and the cockroaches are running around. As a cockroach, you want to say, oh, no, I kind of said it could be either or. No, you did not. You most certainly did not. Your show did not. Your network did not. And here's one of the reasons your network did not. Your network was at the Winter Olympics, which NBC underwrote the Winter Olympics, and let the murderous Chinese Communist Party make it a showcase at the very place where Putin came over and did his no limits deal. Joe Scarborough and MSNBC, who are total collaborationists with the Chinese Communist Party. Frank, and they're sitting there now, oh, we're doing everything. Hey, note to self also, if they're not cooperating, cut them off from Wall Street, cut them off from technology, start to seize their assets, sanction them. Oh, they said they're not going to cooperate. Okay, I guess then, we're just never going to find out. No, baby. Cut a CNBC and MSNBC and NBC Sports from going over there and giving them billions of dollars to showcase in front of the entire world what great guys they are. You're a collaborationist, Scarborough. You take dirty money from collaborationists, okay? Your whole network's dirty. NBC's dirty. Comcast is dirty, right? The Roberts family that owns is dirty. You're taking dirty CC. You're giving the CCP dirty money. You're in bed with them. Frank Gaffney.
Yeah, Steve, we called them the genocide games. And NBC, you're absolutely right, partnered up and was using the games to do what the Chinese Communist Party wants most, and that is to be legitimated. And this is exactly why we're talking today about various ways in which we speak to the issue of delegitimizing the Chinese Communist Party. This is absolutely crucial. You've picked up very powerfully, I think, on the idea that it is a transnational criminal organization. That's exactly what it is. It's a leitmotif of our new book, The Indictment, which talks about that. But we also talk, Steve, in the indictment about what is arguably the single most serious line of attack the Chinese are using, not just to help legitimate themselves, but to destroy us. And that is elite capture. And you've teased two different aspects of this. One is Judy Chu. We're going to be talking about her and others in our political elites captured by the CCP with our colleague Trevor Loudon. You talked about the Department of Energy's new finding, such as it is, that they agree that there's a possibility, they have low confidence, but there's a possibility that it came from, the COVID virus came from a biowarfare laboratory in Wuhan. And by the way, Steve, I just want to remind people, the book that we did, our Team B3 book, which is available for free as a PDF at ccp@war.com, found, just as the Department of Energy has done, that there's no evidence this thing came from natural sources. None. Zero. Nada. So what are the chances then it came from a laboratory where Tony Fauci was doing this gain-of-function research and so on? So that's another area. And the reason that's so important, the reason we did this study was one of the people who works for Joe Biden, a former West exec figure, Avril Haines, is the director of Central Intelligence. West Exec is an outfit that was doing business with the Chinese Communist Party, with Tony Blinken and others.
By the way, hold on. She's head of hang on. She's head of DNI. She's the head of, Admiral Haynes is head of DNI.
Director
correct?
of National Intelligence, correct. I beg your pardon. Director of National Intelligence. Exactly right. Yeah.
Hang on. I just want to make sure you understand, but hang on, slow down. Tell me what West Exec is. Refresh the audience's memory, because this is another bombshell they never want to talk about, and why the good admiral was essentially a lobbyist, an unregistered foreign agent for the CCP at West Exec, sir.
Well, I think a number of these folks were. They were not officially lobbyists because they supposedly did not try to get federal funds for their clients. So they don't tell us who their clients are. They don't disclose how much money they took in. And they try to play games with even who was on the payroll. For example, Avril Haines' name was removed from the list, even though she worked there for 3 years. So it's a racket, basically, that was used, I think, as part of the larger Biden enterprise, now doing business as the Biden administration, to garner funds from the Chinese Communist Party. So there's another example of the enemy within problem. Another that Reggie Littlejohn is going to talk with us about is the Biden team's efforts to abandon our sovereignty to the World Health Organization. And unbelievably, Steve, we've got breaking news here that the Congress of the United States and Joe Biden have collaborated to greenlight that action. It's unbelievable. Then finally, we've got tomorrow in our Committee on the Present Danger China webinar, the picture of Wall Street collaborating with our enemy to finance its unrestricted warfare against us with your money, folks. So we've got a very rich tapestry here to unwind, and we're going to disclose how seriously penetrated we are and why Mike Gallagher, the chairman of the Select Committee in the House of Representatives, supposedly studying the Chinese Communist Party threat, must revisit a statement he made yesterday on Face the Nation to the extent that he said, quote, questioning anybody's loyalty to the United States is beyond the pale, unquote. Not only is it not beyond the pale, Congressman, it is job one for your committee.
No. Hey, we gotta. And then he went on. He's from Wisconsin to trash my man McCarthy. Remember the whole thing of McCarthy and how McCarthy came to light. And we know from the Bannon. In fact, I'm going to get the world's expert, Trevor Loudon, on here in a second. The Bannon, after the KGB fell, we know now that I.F. Stone and all these KGB agents and the place was infested. State Department and the U.S. government was infested with communists. This is why the Patton's army didn't go to Berlin. This is why Montgomery was held back. This is why we let the Red Army take it. This is what Joe McCarthy came to power because of who lost China in 1949. Here's the history that's not taught to this country. Our ally, look, the English were our allies, don't get me wrong, right? We've had a great relationship, a special relationship, but they were fighting for an empire, and the royal family was not with us. They were trying to cut a deal with Hitler the entire time. The English working people, the same ones in the Midlands that wanted Brexit and backed Nigel Farage on Brexit were the same ones that had Churchill's back, that wanted Churchill's prime minister. Our two central allies in World War II were the Chinese people and the Russian people, the Chinese Lao Beijing and the Russian peasants and serfs. They're the ones that took the brunt of the Wehrmacht and the Japanese Imperial Army. And we left them to themselves with the Bolsheviks in charge, and worse, if it could be considered worse, Mao Zedong, and we put Mao Zedong there. Mao Zedong was put there because a communist in the State Department who lost China in 1949 drove the entire exposure of communism in our country and drove it. And McCarthy drove it out, exposed it. And I'm telling you, who was his wingman? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He was one of the junior lawyers on there, and he was just as tough. And another guy who backed him up was Jack Kennedy. That's when the vote came to censure McCarthy. Jack Kennedy had a bad back that day and couldn't make the vote. His old man said, you're not going to censure McCarthy. You want to be president of the United States. And everybody in the United States, everybody around knows that the place is infiltrated with communists. Let me bring in Trevor now. Trevor Loudon is the world's expert on this. Trevor gave me this lecture 12 years ago, and it's so overwhelming as almost to be unbelievable. But Trevor Loudon has been right about every topic on this he's brought up. I want to go, by the way, can we have, let me have the guy, let's play this short clip, and I want to bring in Trevor after and have him respond to this.
Do you think Congresswoman Chu should be looked into?
I think everyone that's standing up for Chinese Communist parties should be looked into, yes. I question her either loyalty or competence. If she doesn't realize what's going on, then she's totally out of touch with one of her core constituencies. I think she has drug along the other Chinese American members to sign this letter, but I do think she's the ringleader, and I'm really disappointed and shocked that someone like Judy Chu would have a security clearance and be entitled to confidential intelligence briefings until this is figured out.
Well, she's entitled more than confidential. Trust me. She's at secret and top secret. Trevor Loudon, not only should we call everybody into question, and this is not racist, we're going for the Americans. We're going for the Americans that are backing this play up. And Judy Chu's an American. She was born here. She's a Chinese American. But hey, I founded the organization that is essentially the government in opposition trying to take down the CCP. So you're not going to run the racist trap on us. That is nonsense. Tell me about Judy Chu, though. How questionable is she in her judgment and her loyalty, sir?
Well, Judy Chu spent many years in the Maoist student movement. She spent about 20 years actively involved with people in the Communist Workers' Party, which was a pro-Chinese, pro-North Korean militant party. They dissolved in the late 80s. They moved into the Democratic Party, but Judy Chu continued to work with those people like Kent Wong, like Jean Quan, like Jose Calderon, right up to the present day. She is Also involved with the Committee of 100, which is, I would say, the leading Chinese influence operation in the country, directly linked to the Communist Party of China's international work front. It's the main propaganda front, the main influence operation front of the Communist Party of China. She has used that position to defend several Chinese spies in this country. She's used that position to go after alleged racism in the military, sexism in the military. You know, I know people in journalism in Southern California who have worked for the Chinese press, the communist Chinese press, and she is regarded in Southern California by the Chinese community as China's representative in Southern California. If they want to know what the CCP is thinking, they listen to Judy Chu. She calls the shots. She has no loyalty to America. Her loyalty has always been to China. She went to China not long ago and said, "I'm coming home." You know, she had a little CCP flag right next to her. She has been intimately involved with the Communist Party of China since she was a teenager, and she still is. She is absolutely there's no way she should be trusted at all.
The CCP, what they try, that's why they got the police stations. Their whole thing is to harass and threaten people who escape from mainland China or people who have been here for several generations of actually coming forward and putting up a take down the CCP movement. This is one of the reasons they infiltrated so many of the groups out of Tiananmen Square. It's the reason the Tiananmen Square movement kind of died out. The CCP and they intimidate. This is the police stations. They're watching you in the neighborhoods. This is what it's not. We're protecting the Chinese and Chinese Americans, and particularly people who left the mainland. The CCP is brutal in going after them. Tell me about Judy Chu. When you say that she's kind of the mouthpiece for the CCP, and the journalists in Southern California say, "Hey, if we want to know what the CCP's latest line of thought is, we listen to Judy." What do you mean by that?
Well, look, I've talked to journalists who work for Chinese publications in Southern California, have been to many meetings, and she was regarded by the Chinese community in Southern California as the Communist Party of China's mouthpiece. She is like the governor of Southern California over that community, much like the late Rose Pak was the sort of CCP's mouthpiece, the guardian of CCP's influence in San Francisco. Judy Chu fulfills the same role in Southern California. She is completely, her whole communist background brings her to be basically a mouthpiece for the CCP.
Trevor, tell the audience about United Front. Talk about groups like Committee on One, because they have all these different front groups and they get these great names, like they're helping people out, all that. Talk about how they infiltrate not just the American side of it or the non-Chinese side, but really how they use the Chinese here, and they do it under threats to have this kind of united front to propagate their rule in Beijing.
Well, that's right. So they have a huge Chinese diaspora around the world. It's several 100,000 in Southern California alone. And they're involved in business and academia and politics. And when they get to a critical mass, these Chinese Americans can affect local elections, and they can set up power bases, as they did in San Francisco, as they have in parts of Southern California. Then they are used to elect candidates like Judy Chu, who basically run these fiefdoms. And so through the Committee of 100, through the Chinese Progressive Association in San Francisco, the Chinese Communist Party directly influences the politics of whole regions of the United States. Started in San Francisco. You see a lot of it in New York now. You see a lot of it in Massachusetts and Boston, and a lot of it in Southern California. So the International Work Department is co-opting businessmen. It is intimidating people. It's setting up little front groups, little Chinese CCP rah-rah groups, and it's intimidating anybody who supports Taiwan, intimidating the Falun Gong people, anybody who's opposed to the CCP. They use their thugs, They use their businesses, they use their local politicians to harass and shut these people down. And it's gone way beyond the Chinese community now. You know, you see people like Dianne Feinstein are certainly under the influence of this kind of thing, Senator Dianne Feinstein, but also Adam Schiff, you know, the former head of the Intelligence Committee. He is very, very heavily involved in the Committee of 100 and has been for at least 15 years. He's met with very senior Chinese Communist Party officials under the auspices of the Committee of 100. But he has the gall to accuse Trump of Russia collusion when he's been working with the CCP for 15 years.
Trevor, hang on for 1 second. We're going to take a short commercial break. I got Trevor Loudon. We've got Reggie Littlejohn, the great Frank Gaffney, all over and get to the bottom of this. And by the way, we haven't even gotten to Swalwell and Fang Fang, right? Where he says, as soon as the FBI briefed me, well, dude, you shouldn't be putting yourself in that situation. It doesn't matter. As soon as the FBI briefed you, too late. Short commercial break. Back with the team from the Committee on the Present Danger, China, next in the War Room.
War Room Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, welcome back. Trevor Loudon is with us. Trevor, I'm confused. Do we have a security review right now for these members of Congress to make sure that they're actually, so you don't end up to a Swalwell situation where you got a guy that's on the Intelligence Committee with the highest classified stuff we have, and he's sleeping with the enemy. He's sleeping with a Chinese spy. Do we have? Are these congressmen vetted right now before you give them security clearances and before they sit on some of these committees?
There are no security clearances in Congress. This is a popular myth. You have to get a security clearance to serve in the Department of Defense, but you don't need one to chair the Armed Services Committee. The argument is the people vet the candidates and the media helps you do it. Well, we've seen how that's turned out. So, that's a massive gap. You know, there are no security clearances. I say there's about 100 people in the House and 40 people in the U.S. Senate who couldn't pass a security background check to drive a school bus in any county in America. People need to understand how wide open we are.
Hold. Hit rewind. You're saying what now?
There's about 100 members of the House and about 40 members of the U.S. Senate who are so enmeshed with China, the local communists, with Cuba, or other national security threats, they couldn't get a security clearance to drive a school bus in any county in the United States. But there are no background checks. There are no security clearances. And so these people are home free. And as they control the budget of the FBI doesn't dare go after them either.
Frank, let me ring in Gaffney for a second. Frank, what's going to be, I mean, the committee's done so much great work. What is the issue? What is the issue we're going to do here to get our arms around this? This is unacceptable to know that we have people that are totally unvetted. Local media in these House races, you don't have time to vet them, and the people don't know, right? Because they're being spun nonstop, and the TV ads are bombarding them. So what is the committee going to do? And we'll start with Chu, but we got to get to the bottom. If Trevor's saying there's 100 in the House and 40 in the Senate, we got to get to the bottom of all of it.
You bet we do. Steve, what we've tried to do so far is in about 70 different webinars that we've conducted in just about the past 6 months, we've been looking at both the unrestricted warfare that the Chinese Communist Party has been waging against it, looking specifically at how they're doing it and the damage that's being done, and looking at the people in our country who are enabling it, many of whom, as Trevor has said, are in Congress or in the Biden administration, starting with the commander-in-chief himself, Joe Biden. But then you've got them in these various other sectors of our economy as well. And our answer to that question, Steve, in the indictment is we need to prosecute the Chinese Communist Party for war crimes against our country and crimes against humanity. And we similarly need to prosecute those who have been aiding and abetting them, which is the definition of treason. This is what Mike Gallagher, I think, needs to be focused on. I pray he will in the course of this select committee. And so should all of the other committees, Armed Services Committee, Intelligence Committee, the, Homeland Security Committee, and on, in both the House and the Senate, for heaven's sakes. But Trevor's absolutely right. His new book about the security risk senators should be required reading for every American patriot, because it's an insight, as his Enemies Within, his other major tome, into who these people are and what their relationships are with our enemies. That needs to be investigated, and they should not have clearances unless they pass background investigations, not by political appointees, by the way, but by credentialed counterintelligence professionals.
By the way, I had John Solomon on today. John Solomon brings up the Sherwin is the lawyer. He is now working with Comer's committee, going to testify. This is one of the reasons I keep saying Biden hasn't announced right yet. They got all kind of bombshells that are come out about his financial relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. Let me get Colonel Grant Newsham on here for a moment. Grant, it's the middle of the night where you are. Thank you so much. Tell the audience, though, about the CCP's infiltration, the pressure they put on business, and what they do to really get their way with us, because this is far deeper than just Judy Chu. And I want people to know it's far deeper than just certain people that have come, either Chinese Americans or people who come from the mainland that are still in the service of the CCP. This is American citizens, business, academia, the titans of Wall Street, the oligarchs in Silicon Valley. Colonel Grant Newsham.
Well, thank you. Well, the Chinese have been very successful and for a very long time, effectively using proxies, Americans, to really further Chinese interests. But what am I talking about here? Particularly Wall Street, the business class. They effectively, smell Chinese money, and this has been going on for 30, 40 years. And what they do is they have made sure that the American government really never cracks down on the Chinese Communist Party. They were instrumental in getting China into the World Trade Organization in the early 2000s, and that has really opened the floodgates, hollowed out American manufacturing, moved it to China. And what this also did was open us up to the fentanyl crisis, the fentanyl assault from the Chinese Communist Party, which is killing upwards of 70,000 Americans a year. But it is that co-opting of America's financial class, its business class, who think they absolutely have to be in China. And that has caused, really America to back off and really to let China have a free run. And, who would I cite for this? Well, I go down any of the Wall Street firms. And, I've been reading their analysis for 20 years, and you probably have too. And the number of times I have heard anyone say, investing money into a country that doesn't have a legal system, where a contract means exactly what the dictator says. It's a capricious dictatorship. Its intention is to put foreign businesses, American businesses, out of business and have Chinese companies replace them. Nobody ever says this is a bad place to put your money. And that is wildly successful when you get people, these proxies, who think what they are doing makes sense and that it's statesmanlike and that it's in America's interest. You've really hit a grand slam, and you have to give the Chinese some credit for that. The U.S.-China Business Council, if you want to look at that, just look at some of their statements. And it's effectively shilling for the United States. They've gotten parts of the U.S. military. Academia is pretty much in the bag. All you have to do is offer a nice donation to a China center and send in a lot of full tuition paying Chinese students. But back to the military, just to give you an example of how bad it was, and it's gotten better, but still there's plenty of people who are just desperate to engage with China. In 2009, the commander of U.S. Indo-PACOM, Admiral Thomas Keating, was visiting China, and he was asked, and he said, I'd be glad to help the Chinese develop aircraft carriers. I don't see anything wrong with it. It's basically what he said. Begging your pardon, this was in 2009, and by then it was very clear what the Chinese had in mind. So this is, you can see, get to say a sense of the scope, the breadth of the Chinese really subversion of otherwise right-thinking Americans, but pretty much all you have to do, and the financial and business classes, is wave some money at them, and unfortunately, most of them will perform like a sea lion at SeaWorld who thinks he's going to get a mackerel snack. And keep in mind that this is the donor class. These are the people who contribute to Capitol Hill, to congressmen and senators for their campaigns, and they have immense powers, as is well known. Even the Trump administration, which had some of the best advisors on China ever, they were fighting this internal battle against the Wall Street, the business class, really representatives, front men in the administration, and it was probably as fierce a fight as they were fighting against the Chinese.
Oh, it definitely was. I got the scars. We didn't win them all either. I got the scars to prove it. No. Colonel, hang on for 1 second as I will come back for solutions. Sure. Talking about Capitol Hill, talk about pressure, talk about people not interested in the sovereignty of this country. Let me bring Reggie in because we have an urgent issue that needs to be addressed. Reggie Littlejohn. Reggie, I thought we put this WHO thing to bed. I thought this thing was done. Now it's raised its head again. Walk us through the urgent task before us on the Biden administration and looks like the House about to give away American sovereignty to WHO, a Chinese-controlled operation in Geneva.
So, Steve, the message went out that when the international health regulations did not come up to a vote, that they were defeated. That was a wrong message. They were not defeated. They simply went into a working group. That working group met last week on the international health regulations. Another working group on a new pandemic instrument, which is really a treaty, is working this week. Those two different instruments put together will completely damage or destroy the sovereignty of the United States, put us in a digital surveillance state. And the thing that's the breaking news that we just learned about Friday is that there's, in the National Defense Authorization Act, buried in this 1,772-page document, on page 950, there is another act, and it's called the International Pandemic Preparedness Act. And according to Francis Boyle, who's going to be one of our panelists today, there's a clause in here in which Congress already passed pre-approval for whatever the WHO agrees to. So this is the thing, okay? The WHO, people don't realize this. The way that the World Health Assembly works is that every country gets one vote. And if a majority of countries vote for something, it passes. What this act does is it makes it so that if these horrible international health regulation amendments pass, if this terrible pandemic treaty passes, that it will subvert the advice and consent of the Senate and become law automatically through a clause that is in this International Pandemic Preparedness Act that was passed last December.
Okay, hang on. Hit rewind. You're talking me in the defense authorization that then was rounded up into the omnibus that paid for it. That was the one that set it out. What page is this? And what it specifically says we've pre-approved what's going on in Geneva right now?
No, it does not say that. This is a matter of interpretation. Okay, so it's in the National Defense Authorization Act, which itself is 1,772 pages. Okay, on page 950, there's something called the International Pandemic Preparedness Act. And according to Dr. Francis Boyle, who's going to be a panelist in our webinar today, and who is a graduate of Harvard Law School, he actually drafted the implementation of the U.S. Biological Warfare Act, okay? The act that's against biological weapons. He says that, and I'm looking at Subtitle D, Section 5560 2C6. Okay, it says here, the purpose of this act is to facilitate national capacity to comply with and adhere to the National Health Regulations of 2005. Okay, we know what those are, but number 6 is any other relevant frameworks that contribute to global health security. So what Dr. Francis Boyle says, and he is an expert in international law, is that is a catch-all that can be used to pre-approve anything that they come up with at the World Health Organization.
Okay, I tell you what, we're going to have you back on tomorrow. Overnight tonight, we're going to work on this and get to the bottom of it, because this is exactly the type of okey doke they like to do when they want to get something in. This is what they tuck in these omnibus bills. We've argued about this defense authorization. It shouldn't have been approved at the time. It needed a lot more scrutiny because it got dumped on people. So, Reggie, hang on. We're going to get you back on tomorrow. We're going to go through this because we've been working this WHO thing for months and months and months, and to now know that, hey, there might be something pre-approved is outrageous. Frank, in the time I've got remaining, though, here's what I want to do. I want to go around to you guys and tell what needs to be done. We got about 5 or 6 minutes. Like, what needs to be done now to make sure that we can start to highlight the subversion that's going on in our country and bring it to light on Capitol Hill and in this administration? Frank Gaffney.
Steve, there's a lot to talk about. Just, I would say the indictment will give people 20 action items. It should be out, I'm hoping, late next month, that will start with, among other things, identifying the Chinese Communist Party as what it is, a completely illegitimate transnational criminal organization. If we get that right, an awful lot of other things, including the funding of these guys with our money, starts getting a lot more tractable. Elite capture has to be stopped, and the accountability that we're talking about with the Select Committee is key to that, as is the work that you do here in the War Room, day after day after day, Steve, and I can't thank you enough for it. Trevor Loudon's got his own ideas, but this is a starting point.
Hang on. I'm gonna come to Trevor and Kent right now, but real quickly. Look, Gallagher is a very brave young Marine. He's got a great record as an officer. People think very highly of him. But how, when a guy sits there and he's trashing McCarthy, says McCarthy's from my district, he ought to stay in his grave or something like that? Does he not understand? It had not been for McCarthy exposing this. Yeah, exactly. This is my point. McCarthy was the font of all truth to get this rolling and to expose these communists that were deeply embedded into the American government. Am I incorrect on that, Frank Gaffney?
No, I think that's right, Steve. He was taken out by Joseph Stalin. And ever since then, the idea that there could possibly be enemies within our country has been absolutely a taboo subject. We've got to get past that. Unfortunately, as I think it was Martin Dees, a congressman who before Joe McCarthy was digging into the enemies within, the communists who had gotten inside our government. Diana West has a marvelous book on this subject called American Betrayal. He warned McCarthy, they will destroy you if you go here. And I think Mike Gallagher is a little nervous about that, understandably. And here's the kicker, Steve. If his committee doesn't do the due diligence on the fact that we do have people in our Congress and elsewhere, as Trevor Loudon has documented, who are disloyal to our country, we may miss the last opportunity we have to make a course correction and defeat the Chinese Communist Party instead of being destroyed by them. We can't let that happen.
Trevor, your recommendations also. What do we need to do immediately to get to the bottom of this and make sure that we can begin to expose these traitors?
Well, look, we have to look. If you are Xi Jinping, think about it logically. You want to take America down. Do you risk a multi-billion-dollar trade war you might lose? Or do you risk a multi-trillion-dollar shooting war before you're ready? Or do you spend a couple of $1 billion buying up American congressmen and senators to wreck the U.S. military, to keep the borders open, to gut the U.S. middle class and turn this country into chaos? What would you do? So that, this same shameless self-promotion, enemies, security risk senators, trevorloudon.com. 30 senators profiled, their links to the CCP, their links to Iran, their links to the communist movement. We need to confront the reality, all of us, that the only reason America is in the trouble it is because we have people in our system who are working for our enemies. Do you think America, the enemy knew long ago they could never take America from the outside? They had to do it from the inside. The Soviets tried it, but they didn't have enough money. The CCP has the money. They get the right through the money. They get the left through the ideology and the money. And they have enough influence now to determine which legislation passes our Congress and which doesn't. So we got to put pressure on Mr. Gallagher to go all the way. This has got to name names, and there got to be prosecutions coming out of this. The American people have to see people going to jail for what they're doing.
Trevor, how do people get the book? Where do they go? Into your site?
Yeah, just trevorloudon.com. trevorloudon.com.
Yeah.
You know, that's you know, people have got to know. People have got to understand how deep this is.
We'll start spending more time on this. Trevor, thank you so much. Grant, we got to bounce, but Grant, how do they get to your social media? How do they find out more about you?
It's Newsham Grant whatever the Twitter thing is. Also, everything I have right is on Center for Security Policy webpage. And I've also got a book coming out March 28th as well, which addresses the Chinese threat, how we got here, what the problem is, what to do about it. And since Trevor has sort of blazed a path, I actually happen to have a copy with me, an advanced copy. It's When China Attacks.
Perfect.
By Grant Newsham, and available on Amazon, or the usual places.
When China Attacks, we'll promote this heavily. I guarantee you we can sell books. The one thing War Room can do is, I commit to you, can sell books. Grant, thank you so much. Frank, we got to bounce. We got a hard stop. Reggie, we're going to get you back on tomorrow. We're not going to let the Biden regime and the House and the Senate give over our sovereignty to the World Health Organization on some Defense Authorization Act that we told everybody had to go through page by page. Okay, we're going to be back at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Going to be in fire with many of the same topics you saw here this evening. See you tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, on the run-up to CPAC. See you there.